Something I see a lot of people talking about is timelines, and I wanted to share my experience. So I'll use what I'm doing right now as an example. When I was a child, I was very creative and artistic, but then over time, I chose different timelines where I was more focused on the traditional programming of traditional work and all of those kind of things that are more people pleasing, fitting into societal standards, and not really pursuing what truly resonated with my soul. And then it was sometime last year that I discovered dot work and started to pursue it. And initially, I had to teach myself how to dot and paint consistency and all of the things that when you get into dot work you have to figure out. But then it was quite funny because at one point I realized I had a piece of artwork that I created as a child, which had dot work on it, and it was really awesome to see that I'd actually, just through life, come back across something that I really loved as a child. And so, in terms of timelines, as a child, I was on that timeline of aligning with my soul and things that deeply resonated with me, which for me, the artwork is a way for me to express myself the way that people do with so many different things, be that music or, there's so many different ways that we can do it. But for me, this is something that I really have learnt to love. And when I started dotting last year, I was getting really frustrated because I knew the type of artwork that I wanted to create, but I wasn't capable of creating it at that point. And so I had to realize that I wanted to do things in a particular way. So the more I embraced doing things my way, of getting whatever I'm painting to a certain point where I'm happy with it, that was when I got really happy with what I was creating, because I was spending the amount of time that I needed on, preparing the stone or preparing the canvas or wood, which I spend a lot of hours on preparation just to get it to the point that I'm completely satisfied with the finished product, instead of being really frustrated. Like if this had a lot of massive like air bubbles, I wouldn't be as satisfied with the end result. So I've really learnt to love the journey of the entire process of creating a brand new stone or a piece of wood or whatever it is. And so for me, that's the timeline that I'm happiest with, creating it to my full potential, instead of, oh, it's just good enough. Whereas for me, I knew I wanted it to be a certain way, and the more I've allowed myself to make it in the way that I really want to make it, the happier I am. And for me, it's not wasted time, because it's all a part of the process. It's all the timeline that I can be my most authentic and have it the way that I want to, for whatever reasons I want to, which primarily for the dotting is just because then when I'm dotting, I'm not fighting with imperfections in the stone that are then making the dot work harder. I can stay more in alignment and more in the flow state And even with making videos, while I was still getting used to doing the dot work, it was a lot harder for me to speak and dot at the same time, which I still, if I'm not speaking, the dot work is better, but it's nowhere near as noticeable as, say, 6 months ago. So, which in if you look at it in timelines, another good example is seeing where the past is affecting the present. So if you're doing something, or just say there's something that you want to do and fear gets in the way, if you look at childhood, there'll be something from your childhood that fear stems from, which could be, I mean, it's not always childhood, but a lot of it, the root cause usually comes back to childhood, even if it's experiences in later in life that are affecting it. Usually underneath that, once you unpack that experience, it links back to childhood. So like where you were fearful to speak your truth, or if someone made you think about something in a certain perspective that created fear, then you're in a lower timeline where you're allowing that past to affect you. So like when I started making YouTube videos, I had a very deep fear of public speaking, which stemmed from which I know now was a timeline that was in childhood, where I was afraid to speak my truth because people would get upset with me speaking my truth, or you know I was raised in the era of children should be seen and not heard, and I watched a video. Someone sent me a video the other day of this child explaining what God is, and it was so incredible to watch this child with his mother just completely embracing him speaking his truth. And it's something that I've learned through interacting with children is they come in, depending on how they were conceived and all of the patterns that were embedded from conception all the way to being born and then speaking. But the more wide open children are, and are encouraged and embraced to speak their truth, they have so much to share that we should be learning from, instead of I'm an adult, I know better, where we've been so conditioned and desensitized and all of that to our innate connection to source, that a lot of the time we'll have those fear programs come up, or old traumas from childhood where patterns are active and we're afraid to speak our truth. So the more you identify which timeline you're in, are you in your most authentic timeline, or are you in a timeline that is being affected by your future, by your past, which you'll notice as well when you really let go of previous trauma, the interactions that you then experience, you'll notice a shift. So people will talk about quantum leaps and stuff. And what that is where you've shifted your perception of yourself, that then your external has to reflect that new perspective with yourself. So, for example, if you think, say, relationships are a good example. If you're always in the mindset of partners being unfaithful, you're going to continuously experience unfaithful partners, which is, a parent relationship pattern, which can be generational. But once you break that, you'll actually realize that you were unconsciously manifesting it based on an active pattern in your energy field. And so as soon as you change your mindset to think about what you do want, which I realized for me in the past, I was focused on what I didn't want, but I realized that it's good to focus on what we don't want, so that then we can identify where the past is affecting the present and shift our perception of what we're focused on. So to focus on what we do want to experience, because what we don't want is, if you listen to Abraham Hicks, it's simply contrast. So it's what we don't want. So as soon as you identify it, let it go and figure out the opposite of what you do want and only focus on that. And so then that's the experience that you will be vibrating and manifesting unconsciously, because it's all energy. And you'll physically see people every time you shift timelines. You'll physically see the way people interact with you will drastically change, and people who don't resonate with that version of you in that timeline will disappear. It'll be like they vanished. They won't speak to you. You won't bump into them. You could both be at the same place at the same time, but on the opposite side, and never even notice that each other's there, because you're in completely different timelines and different vibrations. So you're not going to align and match unless you get into that timeline where you did resonate, which if you both connected on, say, codependency or people pleasing or whatever the timeline was, then you'll interact again, just to mirror that back, to break that cycle. And then usually you have new people come in with different experiences. Some people will come in when they shift within themselves, but if they're not doing the inner work to shift themselves, they're going to vibrate out of your life, and you'll vibrate and attract new people into your life based on the experiences that you're wanting to have that are active in your energy field. So I hope that helps, and I will speak to you soon.